Welcome back to the show, friends. Today I sat across from Cade Prior in the studio. He's a award-winning documentary filmmaker and the foremost expert in the West, at least, on the Japanese futon mattress, also known as a Shiki futon, because none of us talk about this. And what I really appreciate about Cade is his curiosity. This is a guy that has an interesting background, homeschooled, beautifully creative mind that's pushing back on a lot of the things in our culture that have become normal, that might be contributing to unintended consequences as it pertains to our health. Mattresses being a big one. Like, none of us really think about this. The quality of the mattress that we sleep on. Is there toxins in the mattress that are potentially off-gassing? The structural components of big, fluffy Tempur-Pedic, and what the solution might be, which might be getting back on the ground or something in between, like the Japanese futon. So it's a really cool take and some really interesting research on this. There's some interest in science, some interest in stories, and I love Cade's open-mindedness and his passion, but not his pushing his beliefs as this is the solution to everything, just pausing and having us ask good questions about all of the things we do, all of the things we think that are normal that might not be. So let's dive into the show. Cade Prior, welcome to the show, my friend. How would you describe what you do?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Appreciate you bringing me on. And the way I would describe what I do, I mean, professionally, I make documentaries and a videographer. And then that's kind of translated to creating my own YouTube videos, which the way I describe those videos is kind of investigative, trying to figure out what's going on in the world, and specifically targeting things that we consider normal, that is without a doubt questioned, and trying to figure out if they're actually healthy for us. So that's kind of where mattresses kind of came into the picture, seed oils, stuff like that, barefoot shoes. These are all normal in society, or parts of them are normal, and I think that a lot of times they're unhealthy for us.
Yeah, it's very cool, man. And I like your YouTube channel a lot. I think you had this new wave of independent journalists, and you're focusing on these health-related topics, like you said, that are so normal, so normalized in our lives. Nobody thinks about them. And all of a sudden you just start asking good questions, and good questions, curiosity, it leads us to some fascinating conversations, which is today. Tell us why you've been sleeping on the floor, essentially, for 4 years?
4 years, yeah, sleeping on a Japanese futon. So.
All right, so what started that journey?
Yeah, so in the process of trying to improve my sleep, I was trying to do all these things like blue light blocking and optimizing, I got an Oura ring, stuff like that. And then something came to my mind where I was like, what about my bed? What about my mattress? So I started to do some research. And across the board, I mean, if you do research and you look at studies that were done on sleep, when it comes to what you sleep on, objectively, everyone pretty much says firm to medium when it comes to the firmness of the bed. So the firmer it is, the better. And then that kind of led me down the rabbit hole of then discovering people who claim that they don't even want to sleep on mattresses to begin with, that people have like sciatica, scoliosis, have transitioned to sleeping directly on the floor, sometimes like just a yoga mat, and fixed a lot of these issues. So I found a community of people that just did that, and I was like, oh, I guess I need to get rid of my mattress entirely. So I spent 14 days on the floor, and to be honest, I didn't like it as much, and there was something missing. And then just so happens that while I was doing that, I was also reading a book. It's called Goodbye Things. It's actually a book about minimalism. And it's written by Fumio Sasaki. It's a great book. And in the book, he talks about Japanese futons. And he's Japanese. And I saw it and I heard him talking about it. I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I want to give it a shot. And so then I purchased a Japanese futon, and it changed my sleep game dramatically. And it was kind of this perfect medium, right? Like sleeping directly on the floor might be a little too firm, right? But the Japanese futon is just firm enough, but also gives your back and bones cushion. So it's kind of this perfect middle ground of not too soft, not too hard. And so yeah, I've been sleeping on it for a long time. I've made 3 YouTube videos on this topic. The videos that I have made on this topic have done very well on YouTube. If you just type in Japanese futon, it should be the first thing that shows up. And tons of people started commenting, oh, I sleep on these, or oh, from your video, I started sleeping on these and I improved my sleep dramatically. So there's a stack pile of anecdotal evidence showing that these are potentially the best thing for us to sleep on. as well as, actual scientific evidence to show that medium to firm mattresses are the way to go.
Yeah, it's really cool. I was trying to do some prep for this episode to look at what science we've got to validate this idea that medium to firm is right. And it seems that when somebody in particular has a back issue, that's always the advice. But it doesn't match up with the marketing advice, I guess, of bigger, softer memory foam is better. So what actually is the Shiki futon? What actually is the Japanese futon? Because you said it's a nice middle ground between right on the floor and these full, 1.5 foot high beds. Like, what actually is it? What's the thickness? What's the comfort level? Do you just lay this mat on the ground?
Yeah, so Shiki futon in Japan is just translated to mattress. So these are traditional mattresses that are found in Japan, but you also find different variations of these throughout the world. And they're usually made out of natural materials like organic cotton, wool. They're about 3 inches thick, which is pretty thin. And they are a futon, so they can be folded up. And the traditional way to do this, how they do it in Japan, is they lay these onto tatami mats, which are these wheat-wrapped mats. They're pretty much like hardwood floors. You actually see them in dojos a lot of times. And in Japan, they have rooms, filled with these. And they'll sit on the floor. They'll drink tea on the floor. They'll stretch, and then they'll fold up their mattress when they wake up, put it in the closet, and then bring it back out. So it appeals to the minimalist crowd in that sense, but it is incredibly firm. Not to deter people from using this when I say this, but I've had people curious about my Japanese bed, and they'll lay on it, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is like a prison bed." This is incredibly firm, and yet still not as firm as like laying directly on the ground. It's actually soft in some ways too, but it gives you the support that your back actually needs. If we compare this to polyurethane foam, which is what you find in beds most of the time. These beds, when you lay in them, most of the time you sink into them. And depending upon the firmness, you can find more firm polyurethane bones, but your back actually needs a firm surface to lay on. In nature, how we have existed, if you want to use the ancestral lens, we were not sleeping on things very soft for a majority of millennia. And it's only the case that every westernized bed has been made incredibly thick and incredibly soft from unnatural materials that we have these problems starting to arise, not only from the lack of density and the lack of material and good materials being used, but also from things like toxic chemical exposure. Because not only are a lot of chemicals used to create these synthetic beds, but also they're heavily sprayed with flame retardants. And I'm sure we'll get into this, but getting back to kind of the crux of it, which is that you need something firm. You need something thin. This is the best thing for you to sleep on, without a doubt. So even if you're going for, a firmer polyurethane foam mattress, you still are looking at the material. And unfortunately, polyurethane doesn't hold your body correctly. If you look at most of your body is kind of in your hips and your chest area or your lower back area. So when you lay in these beds, you sink in versus being aligned and straight.
Right.
So a lot of people actually have back issues. I actually, before switching to the Japanese futon, had some back issues that I thought was just related to sports and stuff like that I did. And it was until I switched my bedroom, like, wow, I'm waking up feeling really good. Like my back is finally being in alignment and straight, and my posture issues started to go away, and it was interesting. So I'm pretty sold on the Japanese futon.
Yeah, it's very interesting because it seems that it makes a lot of sense to me because it kind of piggybacks on this idea of barefoot shoe. Like we think of support, and for some reason in modern culture, we've arrived at support is the most maximal padding we can give. So you see these like ridiculous running shoes, and they're basically like platforms, and we know about what that does to weaken the foot. So if you apply a similar logic and your spine is kind of collapsing and you're shrinking into this like blubbery mess while you sleep, it doesn't seem that would be the logical solution to provide the structure necessary to actually heal. So firmer is better. And again, we do see that in the limited research that's available. But then we've got Tempur-Pedic, memory foam, Bluetooth mattresses, heating, cooling. Some can recline, some can do all of this kind of stuff. So back pain is something that a lot of people suffer with in the United States and worldwide, I think, in Western cultures, because of issues probably not spending as much time on the ground like they do in Eastern cultures, whether it's sleeping, whether it's sipping tea on the ground, that inbuilt movement and mobility. 100 million Americans report back pain. That's impacting the quality of their sleep. If you're not sleeping well, you're not recovering well. We spend a third of our lives in our beds. And so structurally, we've already identified that could be a big problem, which might be a reason people would want to kind of experiment with something like a Japanese futon. But you mentioned toxins too. What's happening there? Like, what is coming off of our mattresses that could be affecting other aspects of our health that's purely not structural?
Yeah. So initially when I transitioned to sleeping on a Japanese futon, I did it for that firmness. Like that was the selling point for me. And it is the selling point for a lot of people. And through making videos, I mean, I've received thousands of comments, people talking about how it's improved their sleep, improved their lives. And then I started to see this thread of people talking about like, oh, I switched to these beds because of chemicals. And the Japanese futon I chose to sleep on was also 100% organic cotton. So I was already kind of checking that box. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I started to do more research on this and kind of, I feel like uncovered like a huge issue that we have in society. And it's becoming more and more of a popular trend that we're seeing. You know, I want to say this. There's a lot of things that are toxic. Almost everything in our society is toxic nowadays. And it's easy to kind of get wrapped up in this, like don't drink tap water, watch what you're putting on your body from soap, polyester clothing, and it can kind of get crazy in some sense. But if mattresses are toxic and you're sleeping on them for 8 hours a day, or at night, I should say, then this is actually a large concern. And the reality is they are toxic. So there's a few things we could look at here. First things first, polyurethane foam, high-density polyurethane foam is incredibly flammable. So they have to be treated with flame retardants. There's actually a mandate that was mandated in 2007 by the U.S. Consumer Safety Regulations that mandates all mattresses to be flame retardant in order for them to pass regulations regarding flammability. This hypothetically is to protect people from, fires in their home, and also to protect the manufacturers for potentially having disastrous fires in the manufacturing process. So polyurethane is incredibly flammable. So it's heavily treated with these flame retardant chemicals. And if you look into what the chemicals they use on these, I mean, it is terrible for your health. There's a lot that goes into it too, in the sense that there isn't regulations on how much of the flame retardants they can use. So even if there are somewhat considered safe levels of a toxic chemical, there's no regulations on how much they can use in the mattress. So it ends up being a large issue. And some states and some companies are starting to do better about this. You can find, chemical-free options. You can find flame retardants that are at least safer to use. And then also, California, as an example, has started to ban or regulate what chemicals they're using as flame retardants, as well as potentially putting a disclaimer on the product saying, hey, this is known in the state of California to cause cancer. If you see that, that's a flame retardant. That's usually what the correlation of those two things are. So when you dive into some of the research and the literature on this, it's really interesting. There was a case where a woman had a child, and this child was 7 years old, and she was starting to go through puberty, early onset puberty. She went to a doctor, and the doctor was like, hey, something in your environment is causing this to happen. This is not normal. And I think through her intuition, or maybe just process of elimination, she was like, it might be the mattress. She looked up the chemicals that were used in the mattress as flame retardants, and they were brominated chemicals, which are largely banned in California, actually. And these brominated chemicals can actually create estrogen in people. So they were like, we need to get this mattress out of here. So they got the mattress out, reversed the early onset puberty. There was another example of this woman who had her hair tested, hair analysis, and she had permanent neurological damage. And the test results came back that she had high levels of antimony. And antimony is more toxic than mercury.
Damn.
It's terrible for your brain. It damages your brain. And she's, through process elimination, thought it was the mattress. She had her mattress tested with a sample from high-density polyurethane. And this is also a mattress purchased from a big-name brand, one of the biggest, largest manufacturers in the United States for beds. And this bed came back with 350 times the amount of levels of antimony that is considered safe.
Wow.
I mean, a toxic amount of antimony inside of her mattress that she's sleeping on every single night. So this is kind of the higher end, like worst case scenario. But what do you think this is potentially doing to you, even if there's a safe level of antimony? Like, I don't want to sleep on that.
Right.
And I think this is causing a lot of problems for people in their sleep quality, but also potentially other areas of their life. And they might be, blaming it on, say mold or other things, when it's actually like, have you looked at your bed? Because that could be the cause of a lot of your issues. So, it's interesting stuff. Also, one thing I'll say on this too is that people are allergic to polyurethane foam in general. There are people that know this or people that don't know it and they think it's something else, but there are some people who literally cannot come in contact with that material itself regardless. I think it's I think it's toxic. I don't think people are allergic to this. I think just people are more sensitive than
Yeah.
others. But there's some interesting stuff when it comes to the synthetic material, the chemicals that are used to create these materials, and then the chemicals they have to treat these products with when it comes to flame retardants. And in a nutshell, it causes damage to our health in the long term, but also potentially in these cases we see in the short term.
As you're talking, I can only think about the idea that the dose makes the poison, right? So in these extreme cases, you're seeing somebody that got exposed to a radically high amount of this for some reason. Maybe it was a one-off in the production process, or maybe they didn't have the capacity internally to detox. But what's the safe level of a poison? And you'd probably argue that it's 0. So you don't even want anything to be 10 times the safe amount. Ideally, we just want these out. And I think I'm going to take a stab at guessing that the real issue here is proximity. Like I've heard and I've done the research on things like rugs that can off-gas and have these things, but we're also not lying down on our rugs for 7 or 8 hours a day. Our skin in direct contact with them. This off-gassing thing, I'm guessing, doesn't mean that just some of these things are being absorbed through the dermis, which we know is a thing. It happens if you put a nicotine patch on someone. The nicotine goes through the skin into the body. Yeah. We've had the NADS guys on the show before, talked about the dangers of polyester slings in men and basically making them temporarily infertile. So things on our skin do cause biological effects. So is that something that's exuding off the mattress and potentially going through and being absorbed in our body? Is it a bit of both? Are we breathing this stuff in? Is it like a slow kind of toxic load that's just leaching into us?
Yeah. So first of all, the flame retardants are meant to stay there forever. You know, if they left, it would kind of defeat the purpose, hypothetically. So so a lot of these issues are going to be off-gassing the entire time that the bed exists. So you have a lot of chemicals, like I say, that go into the process of making the materials, and then a lot of chemicals that are used to treat the materials so they don't, quote unquote, catch on fire. And in a nutshell, just through, I mean, even if you were, say, one night sleeping on this, not a big deal, but through years and years and years, this can accumulate, through time. And like I said, I think it's easy to, get, I'm super scared of sleeping on a bed. No, you're fine. But if we can start to kind of look at the areas that we are potentially being exposed to unnatural things and start to improve those areas, like polyester clothing, like beds, we can slowly start to reduce the amount of exposure that we have to these toxic chemicals. And once again, like you said, it's like you're sleeping for so long. I mean, you sleep, what, 1/3 of your life, or a third of your life? It's something we need to look at. And like I said, I think for some people, they have these really bad cases where they end up getting exposed to mattresses that have tons of chemicals in them. But you can test your mattress if you really, really wanted to. I bet you would find terrible stuff in it, stuff in it that you would want to remove. And if you're into this, health lifestyle, I think it's one of the first areas that you should look for improving your sleep. And it just so happens that no one in Western America sleeps on anything different besides the westernized bed.
Right.
And companies have found out that people like things soft, for some reason. I mean, I do too. Like if you lay in a really soft bed, you're like, wow.
Like, ooh, it's so soft.
Yeah, but that doesn't equal a good outcome, and that's kind of this reverse engineering it. Is like, if we want to get good sleep, we need to figure out what causes good sleep. And just because it's contrary to what we want to think, that hard equals good sleep or firm equals good sleep, that doesn't mean that that's not true, right? We need to look at what is actually going to give us the best outcome and be open-minded to the fact that it might not be, what is sold to us on an everyday markets.
It's like the comfort crisis analogy, right? Like the more we seek comfort, like, oh, when I sit in this temporarily, it feels really comfortable. Therefore, that must be the best. But what are the unintended consequences of seeking too much comfort? Well, we kind of go into a state of entropy. If we're too comfortable with our temperature control and our entire lives is at like 72 degrees, we lose the ability to tolerate any cold or any heat. If we are too comfortable with our bodies and we never put them under stress, they never adapt. So it's similar. I think there's this, like you said, we do love soft things, soft dogs, soft clothing, soft beds, but what's the consequence of that? Because we're not designed to be soft. We're trying to become anti-fragile. We're trying to be resilient and trying to mimic a lot of the things that we've done for our ancestral evolution, because they usually hold the gene keys in terms of what gives us optimal health. So people are becoming aware of this a little bit. Companies certainly are. And I know that companies are, because the last purchase of a mattress I made, which wasn't that long ago at all, was a green mattress from the brand like Avocado, I think it was called. And it was expensive, but I felt better about spending a little bit more money to have a mattress that wouldn't off-gas or that had either natural chemicals or safer chemicals. Yeah. What's your take on this? How good are these cleaner, greener mattresses?
Yeah, well, I think there's two ways we could kind of put this. It definitely depends upon the company. There are companies that just use these marketing buzzwords, and I don't know what they mean. If a company says natural, like we even see that in products, like natural flavors, it's like, what is that? You know? So there are definitely examples of companies that are just trying to maximize on this fact and not really actually creating a product that's healthy, which is why I'm attracted to the Japanese futon, because I think it is the healthier alternative. It's also a cheaper alternative, which means that companies can't really maximize on it as much. But at the same time, like, I do think there are companies that are starting to become more aware of these chemicals that are used, and they are offering better alternatives. And I think there's a guarantee to some degree that if you were going for the cheapest, Amazon option mattress bed versus putting in some effort, maybe spending a little bit extra money to find a bed or a mattress that is claiming to be healthier, you're definitely doing better. Right. I don't know how much, to what degree, but like, good on you. Like, you're putting in the effort, even if you are still exposed to toxic chemicals at that point, at least you're doing your effort to try to find the solution that best fits you. So, but I think that's what needs to happen, right? Like the way people buy mattresses is they're easily targeted, by like these companies like Purple or whatever, selling them on these crazy technology of like, this side's warm, or we're using this new synthetic material that's so good for your back. And when you look into it, you're like, this is actually just marketing BS.
Yeah, they're making that up.
Yeah, it's not true. Because once again, studies-wise, it's firm mattresses. And I even think we would see, if people conducted studies on Japanese futons, these would be the far superior thing to sleep on. Just people aren't going to do that, because why would they? There's no incentives there. But, if you've gone your entire life never questioning what you sleep on, it shouldn't be, in my opinion, a surprise when you find out that these things aren't great, because we see this being the case all the time. I mean, if you don't question your clothes, you don't question your food, and you just go with the mainstream, the way that they push us to flow, you have to do that. That's the consumer has to do that nowadays, unfortunately. Yeah. It's a sad reality. But I think it makes sense. And also I have a little bit of empathy, because it's like, if you're not questioning it, you're going to be put into, forced almost to buy a bed or a mattress, because, well, that's all that's available. Japanese mattresses are very common in Japan, obviously, not in America. They're becoming more popular, especially through the stuff that we've created. But it's definitely, you're a bit strange to do it. Yeah. But it's not strange. It's actually the way we're supposed to sleep.
Yeah, it's more normal. Yeah. And I think about this all the time. Like, I was wild camping for like 7 days last summer, and was sleeping on the ground and loving it, and just kind of chuckling to myself every night as I got down on the ground. I was like, oh, this is how we're supposed to sleep, and it feels great. And then going back to the bed and just thinking, like, this is how we're supposed to do it now, I guess, in the developed West. And I think one of the more hopeful and inspiring things about this branch of optimizing in particular is whenever somebody does, let's call it, wake up from the conventional thing, whether it's the food messaging or the toxic, chemicals on the skin, etc. When they go for a healthier option, it's usually like, I'm okay with paying more because I have to, because I'm protecting my health. But health has become really expensive now. The healthier food, unfortunately, is the expensive food. The healthier products are often the more expensive ones. And you said this one's actually much more cost effective. Like, I think I just spent like $1,500 on a new mattress, and you were telling me you can get these for like $300.
Yeah, between $300 to $400 for like a queen and 100% cotton Japanese futon inside and out, and then chemical free. So the flame retardants they use are chemical free. So we're talking about a very cost effective solution on the higher end. You can find them more expensive for sure, but if you go to Amazon too, and I don't know what they're spraying these mattresses, these futons with, but you can find Japanese futons for as little as $100.
Amazing.
So they are a cost effective solution that's arguably more healthy. You just have to kind of get past the weirdness that you might experience, at least the judgment maybe from other people when they're like, what are you sleeping on again? Right. That's a bit strange. And then what's cool actually about the Japanese futon, so they're meant to sleep, they're meant to be on the floor, and they're meant to be placed on tatami mats, like I said, how they do it in Japan. This actually prevents mold, and the tatami mats can cost about $300. Okay. So you would price it up there a little bit if you wanted to go super authentic. And then if you maybe want to be a little less weird or just have the benefits of like a lifted bed, they actually make lifted beds. So you can have storage underneath.
Gotcha.
You can put tatami mats in these lifted beds, and you have a pretty semi-normal setup, but a traditional Japanese and arguably the healthiest setup that you could have. Those are a bit expensive too. So you could end up, spending more money, but you can do it on a very cheap end. And that's actually a really good thing. And I don't want to say this to deter people, but it definitely has that stigma of like being, you know, inexpensive. Like I have a friend, I have tons of friends that sleep on Japanese futons actually.
Is that all because you've been bugging them about it?
A
like,
little
all right,
bit.
I'm gonna try it.
Yeah, a little bit. I definitely have had like, I'd say 5 people in my direct inner circle transition to sleeping on futons because of the videos I've made.
That's awesome.
And then, you know, thousands of people on YouTube as well. And all of them objectively speak highly of it. But yeah, I have a friend who was dating a girl and she came to his house and she looked into his room and she was like, oh, I guess this dude's poor. Like he's just sleeping on the floor, he's struggling, you know, and he's like, no, I actually choose to do this, you know? So there's some interesting stuff there, but it's a cost-effective option. And I do think if you want to get conspiratorial, you know, when you get into the chemical industry and why these flame retardants are inside of these products, they still catch fire in real scenarios. They don't really work. And then mattresses, like purple mattresses, $2,000, $3,000. And then companies even creating a better solution that's still expensive. It's like, what are we really solving here? There's a great solution that fixes the problem too of like a natural material and the density and the firmness that you need, and then also solves the problem of like a chemical-free option. So it gets interesting and it's cheap, you know, and I think there's not like super conspiratorial, but there's definitely more incentives when there's money involved, of course, rather than less money. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's super interesting. The practicality issue of this is interesting to me, like you said, with your friend and your friend's girlfriend thinking he's a bit of a brokey. But actually, in some ways, that's cool because it's a bit of a flex to reject the mainstream in some ways as well, right? Like, especially if they're aware of why they're actually doing it, not just to be contrarian for the sake of it, but like, oh, this is healthier, it's cheaper, which probably means we're not going to see an explosion of this overnight from big companies because they're very rarely going to go to the cheaper product. What are some of the other practical issues of this? Like, you have a long-term girlfriend now, like, was she a Shiki Bhutan believer before you guys got involved? And it's like, I guess that's one of the things, right? I'm going to bring my partner over and I don't want to sleep on this broke ass bed. What are we doing? Like, what's some of the things you hear from your friends that are living this life? Yeah.
So I'll answer this in kind of 2 ways too, and kind of address something where people ask a lot about sex on the bed, because that's usually,
saw that in the comments. There was a lot of curiosity there.
That's usually what happens right on a bed. So it makes sense and why people would be like, well, what about that? So I'll address that kind of as like a leeway into the first answer of this question. So I think, you know, I'm not one to give a dating advice, but I think when you're being authentic and natural, you're going to attract the authentic person that you're meant to be with. Yeah. If you're trying to be someone that's not truly who you are, trying to impress people, you're going to attract the opposite person that you're meant to be with. So what I have seen people who are like, you know, found it weird or judged me for it or whatever, but actually most of the people that I have experienced both from a relationship level, but also from a friend level are like stoked and they want to hear more about it. And then I have a girlfriend, and she actually says, she's like, thank God I found you, not only for, you know, the reasons of our relationship, but also like this has improved my sleep, and I would have never came across it before then, you know. And then, you know, you do also have to consider too, like sometimes it can be hard, like if you want to sleep on this and your partner doesn't, you know, there's aspects of that where it comes into where you have to be flexible with your partner and understand that maybe not everyone wants to sleep on this for whatever reason. I do think, though, if they give it a shot, they would like it a lot. And that kind of leads me into the next thing, too, about what about the sex? Because, like I said, I get a lot of people asking me about this. And it's a funny thing because you know, I'm not going to get graphic or anything like that. But the answer is, like, well, I'll say this in a short answer, is that there's an argument you should buy this just for sex. Like, it's actually like you want support. You want to be able to, like, move and function, not, like, sinking into a bed, you know, like, not, like I said, not to get super graphic, but I definitely would say that it's a better experience for both people across the board. And yeah, I think even if you wanted to get super, you know, weird in that sense, you could have your traditional bed and then pull out the Shiki Bhutan when you're ready to go for it. You know,
we call it a sexy Bhutan if we're using it for that. You reminded me, I can't believe I've only just remembered this, but my younger brother had a waterbed, and I despise that thing. I would lie down in it sometimes. I would get seasick sleeping on this thing. And now I'm thinking about some, you know, adventures there with a partner on the waterbed. It would be crazy. So
disastrous.
Disastrous.
Yeah. The waterbed is a perfect example of like the worst idea.
The worst idea for a bed. No form or function to that at all. You just kind of sink into it, and it's all like gooey and mushy. And I just think like life is practice. And do you want to practice that? Do you want to practice just slumped? You know, I don't think so. It doesn't make much sense.
It's not natural. It's not the way humans have evolved to live and sleep. So yeah, you're totally right.
Yeah. What do you, like you said, your girlfriend actually thankful that she encountered this. She's like, I enjoy this. I prefer this now. So she's been Shiki Bhutan pilled. If you could like wave a magic wand and just like magical fairy dust replace everybody's mattresses, do you think this would move the needle significantly forward on people's sleep issues? Because about a third of the adult population suffer from some kind of sleep disturbances, insomnia, trouble sleeping. Just over 50% of Americans are sleeping less than 7 hours per night. So we know from a health standpoint, that's not good. And we know from a health standpoint that pretty much all the good things that happen to you recovery-wise, immune system-wise, memory-wise, happen when you sleep. So it's not good that we know all of this about sleep, yet people are sleeping crappy. Do you think waving the magic wand and getting everybody on a Shiki Bhutan could be a solution?
Yeah, so great question. I do think that obviously there's a lot of things that contribute to sleep and sleep problems, but it's a huge issue, right? Like, yeah. Even in my process of trying to improve sleep, like I have friends who will purchase an Oura ring and it will tell them constantly, they're like, you're getting terrible sleep. And they're like, I'm doing all the right things. I'm like, I'm blue light blocking, I'm doing this. And I'm like, yeah, but you haven't questioned your bed. So what I would advise is like, this is the first place you should look. And if you're not fully sold on the Japanese futon, at least you could try to find a firmer, more natural mattress that's still traditional in the sense of westernized mattresses. So, you know, you could make a step forward in the right direction. I still think you have further ways to go because I do think the Japanese futon, it's hard to say like this is good for everyone. I think anytime someone says this is the best thing for everyone has to do this, you should be weary of what they say.
Wait, like not everybody should be vegan?
But I do think that this arguably is the best thing for humans to sleep on. Of course, there are always one-off scenarios, and you do have your uniqueness of your individuality that you have to pay attention to whenever you're trying something out. But pretty objectively, like I said, most people switch to this. They're not going back. You know, they're like, wow, I'm sold. So I do think it is a solution for a lot of people, and it's the number one area. Like if your sleep is great, don't change anything. But if you are having sleep issues, or you just think, yeah, I think I can improve this aspect of my life, there's a lot of things you should do. And I would argue the first step should be look at your mattress and try to perfect that and get that into a good spot, because that's what you're sleeping on.
That's right.
You know, and if you're having back issues, scoliosis, sciatica, chronic back pain, we could go down the list of all these different things. Look at your mattress. Look at the firm, how firm it is, and look at the material. And then also, if you're having some health issues, the mattress is another place to look for the exposure to chemicals. So I think it's the first place to look, along with a bunch of other stuff that's going to trickle down the line. But it is a great place to start in the sense that it could solve a lot of your problems already. And then you stack those with some good habits, and you're good to go.
I like where you're going with this because it feels like a relatively low-hanging fruit to at least try. Like you mentioned, a couple $100 you can be invested on this to change one of the bigger rocks in your entire health journey. Like sleep architecture and the quality of your sleep is about as high up on the priority list as possible. You've got food, maybe king, and then you've got right underneath queen. Like these two are so important, sleep and food, and then light, and then all these other habits you said. Yeah. But if you've got a chance here to do something that's relatively low-hanging fruit that you said, and I like that you said this, that if your sleep is great, you don't need to change anything. But what if it could be better? And what if this is an experiment that you want to try and you want to throw a couple $100 at this and just see? Because I guarantee that if you can get an extra 10, 15, 20% out of your sleep, you are going to feel that in every waking moment of your life. Your energy, your vibrancy, your productivity at work, your creativity, connections with loved ones. Like sleep is not that sexy because it's just, we kind of check out. But it's so important. And I think that having something, again, that's more accessible for people, or actually, don't spend any money. Lie on the ground if you're willing to go, and do the extreme test of just lying on the ground. There's something to at least try there.
Yeah, and that's what I would even advise people. Like, if you're hearing this and you're like, something sounds right, I'm like, cool. After the end of this podcast, lay on the ground for 5 minutes. Just feel that. Feel what that feels like. You'll probably feel a good sensation. Yeah. It'll probably feel right. And I'm not saying you need to do that the entire night of sleep, but, because something to think about too with these Shiki Bhutans is they do take time to adjust. Like I said, they are incredibly firm. They're not as firm as directly on the ground. They still give your body the cushion that it needs, but you do need sometimes a week, 2 weeks, maybe even 3 weeks to fully adjust. Some people don't need the adjustment period at all, but most people do. And then after that point, you're going to see huge results. So it could be a 3-week test or a 3-week and then some test, and it's a cheap option. You could give it a try and see how it is. And I know for myself, I'm so adjusted to them to the point where if I sleep in a traditional bed, like I wake up injured, like I went to war, you know. Like there's this movie called Castaway, and in the movie he leaves this island that he was cast away on, and they show him in a hotel, and he's choosing to lay on the floor instead of the bed. And I found this funny because like I was like, oh yeah, that's how I feel, you know. Like there's times actually where I prefer just the direct floor because I'm so used to these beds. So you do have to give yourself a bit of time because you've been sleeping maybe 20, 30 years on these super soft beds. You need that adjustment period. And then also another note on that too is like, I wonder if like you took like an indigenous tribe and you put them in one of these beds, they probably have the worst night's sleep they've ever had, you know? And so it's interesting stuff. But yeah, it's like start off, you know, just lay on the floor, get on the ground more. A note on this too is that when I went to Japan and I was able to sleep on these constantly, I felt incredibly healthy. I noticed myself even just being in these rooms and drinking tea or working in these rooms on the floor. I was using my knees and my legs and getting down on the ground and getting up, and I was very mobile, walking a ton. We just don't have that in our society. And there's a lot of elderly people in America that are like not mobile at all. You know, if they fall to the ground, that can sometimes, you know, be the end.
That's it.
That's it. You know, they hurt something, they can't get up. The cliche, you know, advertisement for that, how about falling, I can't get up. Well, I think one of the things that I noticed in Japan is that the elderly are so mobile. And I do think it is part of this getting down and moving. And you feel that when you start to sleep on the floor, is that you're moving your body more and you're moving postures. You're not staying in one posture all the time. And I even think some of the lifted beds that we see in modern society is because people can't get to the ground anymore. They can't. And we're actually meant to be on the ground a lot. The resting squat that the Asians have, you know, there's a lot of interesting things there. So give it a shot, but also if you could take something from this too, is like get on the ground more, you know, work on the ground, be more mobile and flexible, and the Japanese futon will naturally push you in that direction.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's Chinese, but it's Eastern, kind of saying that you're only as old as your spine. And they show that so much better than we do here in the West. I think if you just randomly pluck the average 50+ Asian person off the street versus the Western person living in America and just tested mobility, things like being able to get up and down off the ground without hands, those are longevity tests. You know, your ability to be able to do that indicates the resiliency that if you do fall down, God forbid, you're able to get back up. Because there's a lot of people here that can't do that. Like you said, it might put them in the hospital and they might never get out. And that's a tragedy. And I love your invitation back down to the floor, because in my movement journey and mobility training, I always tell people the floor is your greatest teacher. It's going to diversify your movement language better than anything else, because it's natural, it's organic, it's got this inbuilt humility to it. There's something about just being close to the ground that just reminds you you're not always up above and better than. Like it's humbling too. Totally, and it's self-scaling, because when you sit on the ground and let's say you're sending some emails, you sit cross-legged for 5 minutes and then your hips are going to get tight. So now you switch to a 90-90, and then you switch to lying on your belly, and then you switch to side lying, and then you go in a deep squat, and you're just constantly greasing the groove and improving your movement language. And I think there's something that our culture is missing there, that everything is like this perfect height where our hip crease never even really drops below our knee crease. Our toilets are getting higher, our beds are getting higher, our office chairs are getting higher. Nobody's going on the ground because it's like, oh, it's weird, it's dirty. But maybe that's the solution: moving, living, and sleeping on the ground. So I love that. Yeah,
and something interesting too, it's kind of pulling on this thread a little bit, but you know, I plan to have kids potentially in the next 2 to 3, maybe 4 years. And I will use a Japanese futon undoubtedly, right? We're talking about the chemical exposure. Right. We have to have organic materials, and it's really hard to find truly organic beds. Japanese futons, like I said, are made from organic cotton, so you can guarantee that you're getting a natural material. It's pretty hard to find an organic cotton bed that's not a Japanese futon, seriously. I will undoubtedly use these for my kids. And if you kind of pull on this thread, I haven't pulled on the thread too much, but there's a lot of mothers who have chosen, instead of the traditional crib, right, of I don't even know what they're using or making these things out of, but they actually have like kind of a floor bed crib for the kids, and they recommend these and they speak super highly of them. So if you want to, you can pull on that thread and look into that. And I think the Japanese futon is a perfect sort of substitute for that, because then you can guarantee no chemicals or less chemicals, and still also have you know, a correct density and a correct structure for the kid, which is super important. Like if you could make an argument, like it's like if we could go to the point in time where they're developing
Yes.
We want to avoid toxic exposure, especially during those points in time. So
Yes.
it even more so adds validity to that. And then also as you're, raising your kid, you're getting on the ground.
Yeah, exactly.
You're forced to move more, and like that's going to be a good thing for you too. So little add on there.
I love that. Let's say somebody is listening and they are kind of drawn into this. I want to try it, but the time's just not right now. Maybe they're waiting for payday or something like that. Yeah. Is there an interim? Like they're aware of, I am feeling some of these things. I never wake up rested. I'm itchy all the time. Maybe I'm thinking I've got mold in my house. Maybe it's my mattress that is 5 years old and I bought off Amazon for $200.
Yeah.
Is there something that they can do that's intermediary? Can they, I know it might sound crazy, but like would wearing pajamas potentially help because you're giving yourself a layer as they eventually work up to pulling the trigger and getting a Shiki boot on?
Yeah, for sure. So one thing I will say too is that you have to, I feel bad in a way that maybe I implanted a seed in someone's head where now they're going to bed and they're like, oh gosh, I'm scared.
Right.
And I don't think you have anything to worry about to some degree. I think it's definitely a concern and worth considering. So first things first is like rest easy, rest assured. You've been doing this for a long time. If you're not struggling yet, or if you are struggling, that's a different story, but you're going to be fine even if you keep things the same way. But this is a potentially area to, rather than go from surviving to thriving. That's what we're trying to do. You can survive in a bed. We're trying to thrive in a bed, right? So if you are looking at like your mattress, something you can do directly tonight, potentially, is try to put organic cotton sheets on your bed. You could get into the sheets too and what the sheets are made out of and what they're sprayed with as well. So that'd be something you can do kind of on a short-term level. Still not great because you're still in direct contact with it and it's still coming through the sheets as well. You could also, if you're crazy, try the floor. Yeah. If you wanted to. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but and then, start to just let this seed be planted in your head. And if you come across something, you're like, I think I want to do this, then follow that thread. Something I will say, it is kind of a hard sell for people because it requires, getting rid of this bed and kind of going this almost radical route. But I promise you, it's not as radical as it seems. It actually, when you do it, it will feel intuitively right. You're not going to be like laying on there like, why did I do this? It's like, thank God I did this. I crave the floor. Like I crave sleeping on the ground or on a very firm surface. I'm actually on a lifted tatami bed, so I'm not on the ground anymore. But I crave it. Like when I go to sleep, like I don't want to sleep on anything soft. I want something firm. This is almost this natural desire inside of me that's been uncovered through sleeping on these. And I think more people are going to have that experience if they sleep on something firm. And then something too I wanted to note, because you said, you're traveling right now. You're in Dripping Springs, Texas. You live in Tennessee, and you actually were staying at a hotel room, right? And you think there might have been something on the bed or something going on in that hotel room. You woke up saying
smells in the room because I'm so not used to them because we don't use them. Smells on the sheets and on the pillows, and anytime. Let's say I ate something that wasn't the best for my health goals. One of my kind of key indicators that something's off is I get an itchy scalp. I have something that feels like a mild allergic reaction. Now, eating has not been an issue. I'm here at Heart and Soil HQ. We just live off organs, meat, raw milk, all the good stuff. But I'm in a foreign place. I'm in a new bed. There's lots of weird smells, and I'm having that reaction again. And because we were talking off air, it's kind of been that seeds planted of like, there could be something there, definitely.
Yeah, and I think, it's like, let that seed plant, and also know that a lot of people aren't talking about this, but this is going to become a larger issue because more and more people are talking about this. More and more companies are receiving lawsuits. Tempur-Pedic is being sued right now for high levels of formaldehyde in their mattresses. So this is becoming a larger issue throughout time. And it's only a matter of time, I think, really, before either companies start offering a better alternative, like you've potentially purchased yourself, or people start maybe migrating towards what you could say an extreme, even though I don't think it is, sleeping on something more traditional, which is a Japanese futon. So yeah,
it makes a lot of sense, and it has to start somewhere, right? These things, because of the incentives, change is rarely from a top-down level. There's probably not going to be some mattress savior that steps in and removes all of these harmful chemicals. It's a grassroots movement. It's people hearing this story and connecting a dot and saying, wow, actually there's something here. And much like the glyphosate story and how Bayer Monsanto has now been sued for billions of dollars for knowing that chemical now causes cancer. If you said that 10 years ago, people would just call you a conspiracy theorist and a quack. Now we have data, and unfortunately a lot of people had to pay the price for that. And what could be the story here that unfolds is we still have many of these off-gassing mattresses in pretty much every home in America, and every single person sleeps.
Yeah.
Every single person. So that's billions of people. Save the billions of people in the East that may be doing it right. So
doing it differently. Yep.
It's super interesting, man. And you've definitely given me something to think about. I like to think that I'm very holistically minded about health. And for some reason, there was just like a blind spot here around the mattress. And I guess you don't know what you don't know. And this is why it's been fun to follow your journey and watch your videos. And you've got other cool videos on barefoot shoes, which there's a lot of analogies here, you know, like you've got to transition to them, and it's the minimalist approach again, and less support might be hard at first, but then it feels so much better because you're like, wow, my feet feel great, my foundation. So I just appreciate what you're doing, and I'd love for you to share anything left that's on your mind, and also point people in the direction to where they can see some of your documentary films and your YouTube videos.
Yeah, so yeah, if you found this somewhat inspirational, or you're starting to question your bed, like I said, don't live in fear. Know that you're going to be healthy regardless. We just have some areas that we can take it up a notch and go from surviving to thriving. And I do think that the Japanese futon is 1000% one of the best solutions to this problem. When you're looking for an option like a Japanese futon, try to find companies that are talking about what chemicals they use as flame retardants. So the one that I bought my, the company that I bought my futon from is called The Futon Shop. They write extensively about the chemicals they use and what they mean by chemical-free options. They use 100% organic cotton, and they have wool options. They also have thicker Japanese futon options, which if you're worried about the firmness, you could go 5 inches. There's even other companies that will sell 9 inches of thickness. So if you're even just a little bit sketchy about that, more looking at just the material and trying to avoid toxins, you can go thicker, and you're actually still in a natural material that has natural density, the correct amount of density that you need for your back. So that's a great option for people that are like, oh, this sounds great, but the firmness sounds a little too much. So check out the Futon Shop. You can also find, like I said, Amazon, Etsy selling these products. And so they're a great option. And then if you maybe against that, take a look at, you know, some companies that are offering mattresses that are chemical free. You can at least kind of check that box a little bit. More natural options. Just know that you're probably gonna pay more. So I don't know if it's a great idea. And then if you want to learn more about kind of the stuff that I'm making and doing, I have a YouTube channel where I make content around these types of videos. You know, I've recently done things like raw milk, seed oils. I'm actually about to do a video about polyester clothing. So a lot of cool threads I'm pulling on, just having fun with it. And then some of the documentaries I made. So there's a documentary called Nourished we did with Heart and Soul called, about pregnancy. So if you want to check that out,
awesome.
It's a great project. And yeah, you can find me on YouTube at Cade Prior, and then Instagram at Cade Prior, as well as just typing in, you know, toxic mattresses and stuff like that. You can start to uncover a lot about what's going on here. So
yeah, it's very cool, man. I appreciate your curiosity and your investigative rigor. I think what I appreciate is that you're not taking a stance of like, this is how it is, this is what everybody should do. I'm just asking the right questions, and I think this makes a lot of sense based on this evolutionary lens. So keep kicking butt, and fam, I hope you get to sleeping better and you potentially check out Japanese futon or Shiki Bhan, or getting down on the ground, sleeping in the grass, whatever we want to do. But let's get back to human. Let's remember. Cheers, brother.
Nice to have me.
Peace out, friends. We'll see you next week. Sleep well. All right, friends. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.